Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Buenos días. ¿Cómo están? All right. Good morning. It's my pleasure today to welcome you to the opening plenary of the CHCI 2016 Public Policy Conference. Our theme for this year's conference is Educate, Engage, Vote. This is a very timely theme as the November election nears, and it's a critical time for American Latinos to engage in the political process. That's why CHCI teamed up with Voto Latino to engage American Latinos, especially our youth, as we invite you to register to vote at CHCI Votes. It's a brand new partnership, and we hope that you all go back and engage your family and your neighbors, because it's not enough for you to be registered, you have to be registering others. So please use the new tool, CHCI Votes. We encourage everyone to take part, because not only is it important to celebrate our heritage, but we gotta flex our muscles too. Today's session will focus on how critical our engagement is. We must ensure that our voice is heard during the upcoming elections and that we are represented when decisions are made that affect the Latino community and our country. CHCI has a history of providing thoughtful and timely presentations at this conference, and this year will be no different. It's also important to note that for the first time ever, CHCI's conference is proud to be a recertification provider for SHRM, the Society of Human Research Management. I appreciate the value that this public policy conference offers. I also appreciate the impact that CHCI has on the lives of so many young people and the benefits from the various programming that CHCI provides. Programs that develop the next generation of Latino leaders. With us today in our audience, we have emerging leaders, including this year's CHCI class of fall interns and fellows. Would you please stand to be recognized? Congratulations to each of you. And I have to share, just on a very personal note, as a proud alumnus of the CHCI Public Policy Program, it's a huge honor to be here today as an alumna, and also to, in my 8 years in Washington, have seen our CHCI family grow tremendously. And I'm so, so proud to be part of this familia and make myself available to all the new fellows and interns as you navigate Washington. And I know everyone in this room is cheering you on. So thank you to CHCI for really enabling us to take our leadership to the next level. It's important to recognize that CHCI is able to continue to offer their valuable leadership programs because they receive help and financial contributions from many individuals and organizations. At this time, we'd like to recognize and thank our Hispanic Heritage Month signature sponsors who make this week of events possible. Warm thank you. And finally, a special thanks to SEIU, the Service Employees International Union, for supporting this morning's session. And it wouldn't be a convening of young people if we didn't ask you to make sure to download CHCI's mobile app. It's a great way to track all that is happening this week, learn about all of the speakers, and rate the sessions after they've completed. We'd love for you to follow CHCI on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Tell your friends and family so they don't miss out on the great discussion. So please take a look at all the tags here on the screen so that you can take part and engage the conversation online. I'd also like to thank attendees around the country who are joining us by live stream. Hello. Please invite your friends, family, and coworkers who couldn't make it today to tune in and watch this important discussion. They don't want to miss it. Now it's my distinct honor and pleasure to introduce Rocio Sanz, CHCI board member and International Executive Vice President for SEIU. Please give her a warm welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. So thank you, Mari. This is great to be here. It's just, an honor to see all of you this morning, and especially I want to thank CHCI for the work you do in our community, and also for bringing the next generation of leaders. We come together in a critical time for the Latino community. Our families have become a focal point of this election. And our young people are listening to everything that's being said about our community. It will be easy to become cynical about the future and the possibility of change, and to buy into a narrative that our system is broken. But we know in this room that the opposite is true, that we are the ones who make change happen. Today, more Latinos in America are registered to vote. Today, more Latinos in America are becoming citizens because they want to participate in this election and in the process of our democracy. And we know also that so much needs to happen, and we hope that during this week, we all get together and make that happen. And we know there are millions of young people who can vote and who want to participate, but we need to ask them. At SEIU, I have the privilege to working with a lot of young Latino leaders. And recently in Colorado, I talked to a young leader who's working to turn out the vote. She told me that her friends are eager to enter the conversation and how to participate. They're just waiting for the opportunity to be heard, but only if we talk to them, if we ask them, but also if we give them the sense of hope that change is possible. If we want to make gains for our families and our communities, if we want a better future for workers that can get ahead, if we want schools where children can thrive, and if we want a country where immigrants are valued for the contributions they make every single day, we must do everything that we can to make sure that our community comes out on November 8th. We must engage our friends, our families, our neighbors, our co-workers in this political process so their voice, our voice, is heard. And we know that we must create the opportunities that we have. So I'm so thrilled that this week and the discussion that we're going to hear this morning with this incredible panel, it will get us going. And the discussions that we're going to be hearing throughout the conference of CHCI, it will get us going. So it is with that we know that we got to continue to provide that sense of hope, that change for a better future, for a better world, it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you again to Rocio. She's a huge luminary in the community and a woman I admire greatly. So next I have the distinct honor to introduce to you the CHCI board member and Senior Vice President of Human Resources for Dell's Corporate Services, Ed Loya.
Thank you, Maria, and good morning to everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to come and share a few thoughts with you this morning. It is an honor to be here, especially the event allows us to explore issues that impact our Latino community. As many of you know, there was some exciting news that we had in the tech sector last week. Dell announced the completion of the acquisition of EMC, creating Dell Technologies, a unique family of businesses providing essential infrastructure for organizations to build digital futures, IT transformation, and then protect information most important to companies. The purpose of Dell Technologies is to create the drive for human potential. We are excited to be a proud new company called Dell Technologies with over 140,000 members around the world in 180 countries, 25 different manufacturing locations. We're also proud of Dell Technologies' commitment to diversity and inclusion. Both Dell and EMC were named in multiple categories in 2016's Diversity Inc. Top 50. This commitment continues, and we believe to be a part of the success of our overall company as a great place to work and as a business that leverages similarities and differences for the team members around the world. We recognize that in a world of constant change and evolution, managing diversity and championing inclusive cultures are essential for our company's long-term success. That's why our partnership with organizations like CHCI are so important. They help us build relationships and actively leverage individual differences and harness everyone's full potential and drive for their innovations and their aspirations, both personally and professionally. As Dell Technologies becomes the technology industry's most trusted provider, we also look forward to working with CHCI and everyone here today to continue to provide unique opportunities, perspectives on how to address the needs of the Latino community. I'm excited about today's involvement and also the conversation that we have coming up in a minute. With that, it is my distinct honor and pleasure for having the opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker today. As most of you know, Senator Menendez has the quintessential American story. The son of Cuban immigrants living in tenement buildings in Union City, he entered public service as a 19-year-old college student, launching a successful petition to reform local school board. Senator Menendez went on to serve on that same school board and then continued his commitment to public service by becoming the mayor of Union City, then a state legislator, and then a member of the U.S. House of Representatives. He continues his service to the people of New Jersey and the United States as a member of the U.S. Senate. Senator Menendez's career has been a tribute to his desire to protect the powerless from the powerful and ensure fairness for every American. He has championed increased consumer protection and corporate accountability, fairness in lending, affordable housing, a comprehensive approach to communities and revitalization of those communities, fought for smart growth, jobs for the 21st century, and updating our transportation system. And it sponsored legislation increasing individuals' access to health care. He's an advocate of fairness in the tax code to help middle-class families get to college and education become available to them, and also retirement to become a reality. He's pushed for trade initiatives to ensure America's global competitiveness. So it is my privilege to introduce to you Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey.
Buenos días, mi familia latina. Welcome to the nation's capital. Thank you, Ed, for your gracious introduction. I appreciate it. And let me start off by recognizing and thanking my friends at the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute. The work of the Institute, its leadership, its example have given a voice in Congress to millions of Latinos and Latinas in the United States for 40 years. And now, as we approach November 8th, in an election year that has certainly been unusual, to say the least, a year in which the Hispanic community has been demonized, insulted, and at the same time courted like never before, we have an opportunity to let the voices of that ever-growing American demographic be heard in this election like never before. And let it be heard that we reject this type of language and that we reject the idea that somehow we are second-class citizens. We are not the other in this country. At the end of the day, the numbers confirm that the road to the White House runs through the Latino community. It runs through our barrios. It may be a freshly paved road in this election cycle, but it will be a superhighway in 2020 and beyond. If anything has been made clear in this election cycle, it is that allowing our brothers and sisters to come out of the shadows and put them on a clear path towards earned citizenship is the civil rights issue of our time and our generation. And we know who's trying to stop us. Those who want to build walls rather than bridges, those who want to have a deportation force to round up 11 million people and separate and divide families, revoke birthright citizenship, and rescind protections for over 700,000 dreamers. And that's why we absolutely have to vote in these elections. The 7% of Latinos who still may find themselves unemployed after the Great Recession don't need to be demonized as criminals, murderers, and rapists, and people with lots of problems. They need jobs. The 1 in 5 Latinos who are still without health care don't need to be treated as lesser Americans. They need to be able to get the care they need for themselves and their families. It is for them that we have to vote. Thousands of Latino students who were born in this country and are facing tremendous debt to get a college degree to compete for good-paying jobs and to be able to contribute to our economy and global leadership should be able to get a decent education without taking on crippling debt. And that's why we have to vote. Latinos account for more than 11%, almost 160,000 of all active duty military forces that protect our nation, putting their lives on the line and leaving their families praying back at home that they will return safe. These men and women are protecting this nation. They're American soldiers and should be treated and respected and never be treated as second-class citizens. It is for every Latino serviceman and woman that we have to vote. It is for federal judges who may have a Mexican background or other immigrant background and are attacked on their ability to perform as a judge because of where their parents were born that we have to vote. And that's why we have to collectively denounce this type of racism. And then on January 22nd of next year, I intend to come back to Washington and put comprehensive immigration reform at the top of the new president and the new Senate's to-do list. I intend to do whatever it takes to build the necessary bipartisan coalition. I was part of the Gang of Eight that passed comprehensive immigration reform in the Senate, only to see it languish in the House. I will take and do whatever it is to build a bipartisan coalition that will find common ground and send a bill to the president that she will sign. But we can't get there. We can't get there until we vote in the name of every Latino looking for a job, looking for health care, for every dreamer, every Hispanic student looking for an affordable college education, and every military serviceman and woman serving in uniform, and for every American with immigrant roots who have earned their position on the federal bench. It is for all of them that we have to vote November 8th. There are over 27 million eligible Hispanic voters in 2016, 12% of the total eligible to vote. 44% are millennials. Over the next 2 decades, young Latino millennials will drive the eligible Latino vote. The second largest voting bloc are adult immigrants who are in the United States legally and who decided to become U.S. citizens, an increase since the last election of 1.2 million, according to the Pew Research Center projections. So those numbers speak tremendously of our potential force. But at the same time, according to those same projections, Hispanic voters lag behind all registered voters by certain measures. 2/3 of Hispanic voters, 67%, say they have been following news about the election very or fairly closely, compared to 85% of all other voters. And while 80% of all voters say they have given considerable thought to the election, a smaller majority of Latino voters, 68%, say the same. So let's keep in mind that despite the potential impact of the Hispanic vote, Latinos still remain underrepresented in the electorate compared with their share of eligible voters in the overall population. Almost 1/3 of Hispanic adults are not eligible to vote because they are either undocumented or haven't yet achieved citizenship. In 2012, fewer than half, 48% of Hispanic eligible voters cast a vote. 48% of those who are eligible cast a vote. By comparison, 64% of whites and almost 67% of blacks voted. In 2012, just about 38% of Latino millennials voted, compared to 54% among non-Latino millennials. I share those numbers because we can and have to do better in this election. Our future, and the nation's future depend upon it. The issues we care about are at stake. Recent national polling shows that immigration continues to be a top issue for Latinos, followed by the economy, jobs, education. Whatever our top issues are, the bottom line is that we have to vote. I learned early on in life when I was changing my school board that when we fail to vote, when we fail to get involved and engage, someone else decides for us what our future will be. And in my lifetime, I have never wanted someone else to decide what my future will be. I've wanted to take charge of my future. Going to vote does that. Getting our friends and families to vote does that. So we have to help our neighbors vote and ensure that this election will see the largest turnout of Latinos in history. En la unión está la fuerza. And we are the political force that determine our nation's leaders. That is how we make our voices heard. And those voices together will be a powerful force in determining the outcome of this election in states like Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, Florida, and others that you'll hear about in the panel. At the end of the day, everyone here probably knows how they're going to vote. But your vote, my vote, our votes are not enough. The votes in this room are not enough. We have to be sure that we tap the full demographic, the new America, and get everyone to the polls. We have to be sure that everyone we know, everyone who feels as we do, votes and gets someone else to vote. But we are more than a block of voters. We are part of the fabric of this nation. We are respected sports heroes, war heroes, community leaders, elected officials, successful small, mid, and large-sized business people, entertainers. After all, it was a Latino who brought Hamilton to life for every American. Yes, we are more than a voting bloc. We represent a movement, a new America, with the potential of influencing the direction of American politics and policies for years to come. We have to realize the overwhelming force we can be if every voice is heard and every vote is counted. At the end of the day, power must be fought for. It is never given. So we have to get out and we have to vote. Bring someone else to the polls. Because when I sit on the floor of the Senate during immigration debates and there are senators who say we can't have any more of those people, any one of us who thinks that those people they're referring to are simply the undocumented are sadly mistaken. Those people are you and I. Those people are you and I. I can honestly say in my career I have never seen an election as consequential as this one. I have never seen an election in which this nation's reputation, its respect around the world, and its interests here at home are so at risk. It's up to each of us to do all we can to make absolutely certain that on January 22nd, we will have an opportunity to send the next President of the United States a bipartisan, comprehensive immigration reform bill that fixes our broken immigration system and brings millions of the shadows to a pathway towards earned citizenship. I'm looking forward to working with all of you next year. Until that day when I stand in the Oval Office and watch the new president pick up her pen and sign that bill into law. So join me, work with me. Let's pledge to lead the effort and make 2017 the year that we finally address the civil rights issue of our times, to help our brothers and sisters come out of the darkness into the light, to fulfill America's promise and its dream. El camino no será fácil y tendremos muchos obstáculos por adelante, pero el futuro de esta nación, yo estoy convencido, está en la mano de nuestra comunidad y sobre todo de nuestra juventud. Adelante. Muchísimas gracias. And now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a friend, a man who needs no introduction to anyone in this room, a powerful Latino anchorman whose journalistic voice and influence have empowered all of us. As the voice of Noticiero Telemundo and now an anchor of NBC Nightly News, he was the first journalist to host both a daily English and daily Spanish newscast. He is a symbol of what it means to grow roots in America, to connect us to this nation and to our heritage, not to mention the small fact that he has won 2 Emmys. So his roots in America are pretty deep already. Ladies and gentlemen, my great pleasure to introduce un gran amigo, José Díaz-Balart.
Good morning. How are you? Buenos días. ¿Cómo están? Nice to see you all. Thank you, Senator. It's a pleasure to see you. And look, we have some ilustres invitados y amigos esta mañana. Yes, let's give them a hand. Let me introduce them and then we'll chat a little bit. But what a pleasure it is to be here with you. Thank you, CHCI, for the pleasure of spending some time with some good, intelligent friends, all of you, and the panel this morning. You know, the issue, and the Senator was speaking about this, about the consequential nature of this election, the important nature of this election, and what it means not only for our future, but also for our standing in the world. Making our voices heard, right? It's engaging our community, a community that could very well make the difference this coming November if we are engaged and if we are participating. And let me just introduce the panelists, although they don't need introduction. But Matt Barreto, Professor of Political Science and Chicano Studies at UCLA, co-founder, managing partner of the polling and research from Latino Decisions, which has been described as the gold standard in Latino American polling by Time Magazine. I say just the gold standard, period.
All right. Thank you.
Since August 2015, Matt has been a consultant to the Clinton presidential campaign, directing all of their Latino polling and focus group research and providing strategic advice on Latino outreach. Matt, thank you for being here. Maria Teresa Kumar, what an extraordinary person you are, Maria Teresa. It's a pleasure to be your friend, first and foremost. But Maria Teresa is the founding president and CEO of Voto Latino. Under her leadership, Voto Latino has become a key factor in national elections and garnered several awards, including several Promax Gold and Webby honorees. Maria Teresa, also an Emmy-nominated contributor to MSNBC, I've heard of that place, and host of MSNBC's web show, Changing America. Thank you, Maria Teresa.
Thank you.
Arturo, ¿cómo estás?
Muy bien.
Recently married?
Recently married.
Congratulations. Arturo Vargas is the executive director of NALEO, Educational Fund, a national nonprofit organization, strengthens American democracy by providing the full participation of Latinos in civic life, serves as the executive director of NALEO, national membership organization of Latino policymakers and their supporters. Arturo is a nationally recognized expert in Latino demographic trends, electoral participation, voting rights, the census, and redistricting. So, thank you all for being here, and thank you all for being a part of today's conversation. And Matt, I want to start with you. As a founder of Latino Decisions, which is a leading Latino political research firm, talk to me about the Latino voter and why is it that polls sometimes end up being so different?
Yeah, absolutely. That's, I think, the best place to start, because we've all seen this election cycle, a lot of different polls on Latino voters. Including some that suggest that as many as 30 or 32% were supporting Donald Trump. When we see these, it doesn't always make a lot of sense to us, because many of us may be in circles where we don't know anyone in the Latino community is supporting Donald Trump. And so we've taken a very close look at the polls, not only our methodology, but all of them. And there's a couple of key principles that I think sometimes other pollsters who are doing nationwide samples or samples in some battleground states don't get right. And it's very important that if we're going to be taken seriously as an electorate, we need the other polling organizations and pollsters to get us right. So number one, we have to make sure that we're using bilingual interviewers and bilingual mechanisms to contact our community, and that we're not just hanging up and excluding people who answer the phone in Spanish.
So what are some of those mechanisms?
First of all, if you don't have a bilingual staff to make those calls and you reach somebody and they answer the phone in Spanish and you hang up with them, you're not getting an accurate portrait of our community. And that's what still, it's hard to believe today in 2016, many of the mainstream pollsters are doing that. They're hanging up. Secondly, as related to people in this audience, many of you, it's very hard to get younger people to take polls and participate, but we know, as Senator Menendez mentioned, that it's upwards of over 40% of our electorate is going to be millennials. And you have to make sure, you have to go out of your way to reach young voters and make sure that they're participating in polls. And so we go through all of those different steps, methodologies, to make sure that when we do a sample of Latinos, that it's an accurate and fair representation of our community. And we're finding very high interest in the election. More people paying attention this year to the election than we've ever seen in previous years. And we're finding very, very strong interest in getting out and voting. And so that's what we think is going to happen. We think we have all the ingredients are there.
So how different is it? Sorry to interrupt.
No, please.
Just how different is it to reach a millennial than an older person in the Latino community? And how is it that you can get them to actually be involved enough to answer a series of questions?
Right. This is an excellent question. This is one of the biggest challenges facing all polling research, is how do we get that sample? And so one of the things that we're doing in our public polls that we're releasing with the media is using a blended approach in terms of the mode, the methodology. We call people on their cell phones. We call some people on their landline phones. Yes, there are people who still have those with a little cord and it rings. And then you can get some older people that way.
Buttons and stuff.
We also are contacting people through their email address or through their text messaging. And giving them a chance to answer in a digital format. And so we know that that's where the community is. And so we're giving people all the different opportunities to answer and not imposing a sort of methodology. But you also have to be outgoing. You have to be forthcoming. You have to encourage people to participate. We have to tell people, no, your views matter. I want you to participate in this poll so that you can tell me, the pollster, what issues are important to you, so then I can relay those through the media or through the candidates, et cetera. And so we take a very, very welcoming and open approach when we try to get people on the phone, and we hope that we have not excluded anyone in our community from participating so that we can tell their story.
And Maria Teresa, it seems as though you have found the formula.
Wow.
And you're always looking to perfect it, but you are actually so keenly focused on this part of our community that is the fastest growing, that is the largest percent of our community, the young people. How is it that you've reached out, and what are some of the platforms you're using?
Yeah, no, and as I have to say, your introductions are always so amazingly illustrious. I think all of us always try to actually live up to them, so thank you. And thank you so much, CHCI, Dominica, congratulations on the kickoff of your conference. Your team is doing a fantastic,
They are.
So congratulations. Voto Latino, we started digital first. And it wasn't because we had foresight of where the future was coming, it's because we had zero money. And as a result, we put up a website, and we started immediately trying to figure out what best technology would be to reach out to young people. We were part of the movement in 2006 where we helped mobilize young people through MySpace and text messaging to walk out of the classrooms. But then we also met them when they walked out of the classrooms during the immigration marches, and we met them there, specifically in New York, and started registering voters there. Because we knew that we needed both an online and offline from the very beginning. That said, we've evolved, but so has the community. So MySpace was all the rage. How many people in this room are in MySpace now? None, right? So you made my point. So in the last 12 years, we've had to constantly adapt to those individuals. Facebook was all the rage. It still is, but as older people started getting into that audience, as young people started seeing their grandparents, they're like, I got to move on. So we still cater to the parents on Facebook, but then we've identified Twitter as a partner. And when we say a partner, we sit down with the company and actually figure out what is it that they need, and what is it that we need in order to actually come up with something. So for example, we just established partnerships with Airbnb. We have partnerships with Spotify. Airbnb, with Spotify, with Twitter, Tumblr, and the idea is like, we have to go where the majority of young people are. Why? Because nobody's talking to them and saying, hey, you're part of this political process. And if you don't see yourself as part of the political process, how are you going to tune in, right? And that's what Telemundo and Univision do so beautifully. They're constantly providing information to our parents and our grandparents of how to participate in this, in civic engagement. We have a harder time doing that in mainstream media. What Matt was saying is absolutely right. In the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, when they say Americans feel X, 99% of those polls don't include the second largest group of Americans that have to be Latino. If we don't know what the second largest group of Americans feel, we can actually not solve for problems, we can actually create actual campaigns. But we try to meet folks where they are. This year we launched for the very first time VoterPal. And VoterPal is an app that you can download. It scans the back of your ID, but it ups it because now you can start registering everybody at your tables. Why? Because we found that, one, for all the hard work everybody did in 2012, we were not meeting the need. There were 800,000 young people that turned 18 that year alone that were Latino eligible voters, but organizations and campaigns only registered 623,000. VoterPal allows you to register, but more importantly, we also know that 90% of Latino youth get their information and their political news from each other. So why not give them the tools that allow them to actually start having those conversations and participate?
Okay, so Arturo, how do you then get a widespread swath of our community to actually not only get informed and get enthusiastic, but to go out and vote? And how do you, what's the process that has to start somewhere early and end with participation on the 8th of November?
Well, the first thing we need to do is to stop lying to our people. We have to stop telling them that this is the most important election of our lifetime, because it's not. Every single election is important. And we need to start acting like that in terms of the political engagement we do with our community. And in this election, it is my opinion that we're seeing our community being used more than in any other election by certain campaign forces designed to elect a particular candidate. What's happening in this election, I think we need to call this out, is that there's been massive investments in only a handful of states to mobilize Latinos to vote for a particular candidate. And what happens is that on November 8th, these moneyed interests with partisan intentions will have the outcome they want. And on November 9th, they will disappear. And what happens with that process is that we don't build the political power from the ground up that we need to hold accountable the very same elected officials we, as Latinos, are putting in office.
Right.
So, in this election cycle, we need to remind everybody, we're not a 3-state community. We're not even a 7-state community. We are a 50-state community and Puerto Rico, and we need campaigns and candidates to respect this community and recognize us as the national force that we are.
And I think what Arturo's saying, and this is where you and I are going to disagree, I actually do think that this is the most important election of our time. I didn't think that before, and only because they are using our community as scapegoats because they're not afraid of us.
Yeah,
they see our political potential, but what Arturo's saying is absolutely right. What happens with campaigns is that they need 51% in order to win. You're going to start hearing campaigns are going to be pulling out of areas they feel is safe, and that means they've reached that 51%. The job of the Latino community is not 51%. The job of the Latino community is to ensure that every single one of us is participating, because then that's when we start driving the agenda. Because we're not driving the agenda otherwise.
No, I want to say that Arturo's point, though, is that by putting a focus, a spotlight, only one spotlight, and say, this is it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, then you start forgetting that, as Senator Menendez was saying, immigration reform doesn't happen from the president's office. We saw when he tried what happened in the Supreme Court. It happens in the House of Representatives and in the Senate of the United States of America. And if you're uni-focused on the presidency, then you may not, Arturo, you may not be focused on all of the other offices.
But that's how we have created a cynical politics in this country.
Yeah.
By only focusing on a single election or a single outcome, we tell our people, this is it. This is the time you really do
and then
have
nothing
to
happens.
vote. And nothing happens.
Right.
And then we come back 4 years later and say, well, no, this is the election that really counts after all.
Well, we do voter registration all the time. So
our people are not stupid. Okay? Latinos know when they're being ignored. Latinos know when they're being used. So when we see low voter turnout rates, as I tell people, it's not apathy. It's that people have lost any faith in our political system such that they see the connection between the act of voting and improving the lives of themselves and their families. And we have done that through our cynical politics in this country.
Okay, so with that in mind, when you are looking at a community that either feels insulted, slighted, ignored, humiliated, there are a number of different feelings that they have. How do you get to understand what exactly it is that they're feeling? Because there is a difference between feeling ignored and feeling insulted, because the reaction to each one of those things may be different.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have both of those things happening this year. You have a large number of people reporting in polls that they're feeling insulted by the rhetoric, and not just from the Trump campaign, but many of the other forces that are out there either continuing that or what happened starting earlier in the primary process. There are many people who are aware of that and are feeling insulted. But then they have to have somewhere to go. It's not enough to just feel insulted and say, so I'm going to do something. You have to then evaluate the choices, and you have to then act on those. And so you have to have a partner in that. You have to have someone who's welcoming you and saying that we want to help you make a difference. We want to help elevate your vote. And I think that Arturo is right about that. We did a project with NALEO in the 2012 cycle, not looking at voters, which most of our work does and most of the attention in TV is on, but looking at the non-voters, looking at the people who didn't vote, and finding out what some of their challenges were. And that's where we found overwhelmingly people telling us they weren't misinformed. They knew. They could tell us about the candidates. They could tell us a couple of issues. And we said, well, we're looking at your vote history here. You've never voted. And they said, that's right, I haven't. Because the candidates don't come and talk to me. The parties don't come and talk to me. They don't ask for my vote. They don't ask me to have input into the system. And so until we change that process by which all of the candidates and all of the parties and all of the civic groups, not just the Latino civic groups, which are doing so much work, these two organizations here, Voto Latino and NALEO, but the, quote, mainstream civic groups are also reaching out to the Latino community, then you will change that perspective and people won't feel slighted and ignored. So the insulting part is there. The frustration is there. But we have to have somewhere to redirect that. We have to have a partner. We have to have a candidate or a party or an issue that we can partner with to say, I feel upset about what this politician is saying, and I want to help this other politician get elected because I feel that they represent me. And until that happens, you're going to continue to see this uneven turnout, this uneven investment. I want to be very clear that the findings we have in research, it's not that Latinos are apathetic. It's not that Latinos don't know, that they don't care, but you have to feel welcomed and you have to feel embraced and that your vote matters and that the politicians want it. And I think that's where we need to focus our
One of the things that I tell a lot of my English only speaking friends, not everybody can speak 2 or 3 languages, as much as we all wish everybody could, is the Latino community is very well versed on a lot of the issues that you think they're not. And it's not just immigration. It's healthcare. It's education. It's the job prospects and market out there. Maria Teresa, I'm wondering, because Luis Fernandez, the president of Telemundo News, yesterday was speaking. He just got back from Spain from an event, and he said something that struck me. He said, when I was courting my wife, I would write her lovely letters. And then when my first child, I would get through to him on MySpace. And then I have been using Facebook for my second child. And my third child is asking me to Snapchat him. It's all the same communication. It's just in a different way. And it seems as though it's in less words, right? So how is it that you can get important information to people who no longer wish to read long and convoluted romantic letters and prefer a 10-second bit of information that disappears?
No, they don't want a trail. I mean, we rely heavily on partners, and what I mean by that is we basically have the love letter come from a Demi Lovato or of a Longoria, and all of a sudden that distributes. But I do think that one of the things that we have to figure out, and this idea of, even if you have a candidate that you're not completely enamored with, the more we participate, then we can actually start steering that agenda of whoever's agenda that is. And what I mean by that is that the gay community has done a fantastic job of making sure that North Carolina all of a sudden is paying attention to transgender bathrooms. No one paid attention when they were passing horrendous immigration laws. No one paid attention when they were passing horrendous voting rights acts that basically didn't allow people to participate.
Unless they're watching Telemundo, but you're
right.
right.
But the moment that the issue of transgender bathrooms came on board, Apple, Salesforce, major companies all of a sudden started paying attention. North Carolina didn't happen overnight. This was just all of a sudden it started bleeding into a population that is 5% of the electorate, right? But what they've done is they've actually created momentum where they recognize that what Matt was saying, it wasn't just about the gay community, but it was about their loved ones and their allies. And we have to start figuring out how do we actually start building that momentum with our allies as well. Because the fact that we have one presidential candidate who said obscene things about us last year, and then everybody else starts getting surprised. I mean, we were the canaries in that coal mine. When he said, speak English, we're rapists, anchor babies, go back to Univision, he kicked out an American reporter, it was okay then. So we have to figure out what is it that we start building our momentum in as a Latino community, flexing our power, so that when that happens, everybody comes together and says, not one more. And that's why I say that this election is so important, because if Latino community does not come out in a landslide, if we don't show up in the polls, if we basically keep coming in at 50% every single time, just because that we're meeting the need of our numbers, it's gonna get worse. This is the election to shut it down and say, not one more. Because it's not about us, but it's also about our families, and it's real. That is why California, almost overnight, turned into a purple state, because they came after our loved ones. California organized, and we represented the following elections. They stopped it. But if we don't stop it, if we think that this is business as usual, it is not. The message is that Voto Latinos get,
we're not going to get to over 50% without the Latinos from California.
Right.
The fact is that one out of 3 voters who is Latino in this country lives in California.
Yep.
You throw in Texas, that's half of our electorate. In 2014, we had a pathetic election in this country. The turnout across the board was awful, particularly bad in California. The low Latino voter turnout in California alone brought down the national Latino turnout average. Just one state. And so we're not going to get over 50% unless we get the Californians and the Texans.
But is it because,
to vote
well,
as well.
I'm not going to make a difference with my vote?
You know why?
We're not building the infrastructure, and people are not.
We're
not building the infrastructure, and people are not investing in Latino organizations to actually build. We have to figure out how do we actually start building in our. I can share with you that we hear organizations saying, "Oh, we're going to go ahead and invest $3 million in Nevada." Well, you know what you're doing? You're investing $3 million in Nevada. 4 weeks away from the election, but you're poaching the people that we've actually been trying to cultivate for the last 6 months. You don't build that pool overnight, and I think that's what you're getting at, Arturo, is that people are taking for granted. Well, we discuss this all the time, so.
Right. And then they leave on November 9th, and they leave nothing behind. What they leave behind is the broken pieces for Voto Latino and NALEO and everybody else to then deal with.
Okay, so Arturo, talk to me, because I want you to kind of finish that thought about what happens in places like California and in Texas, totally different decisions.
Throw in New York,
but
when
you live in a state, and I've seen it, and I'm sure all of you have, is like, I live in a state where, my vote really is not going to make a difference in the general election, so I'm going to vote my conscience, let's say. I'm going to vote for a candidate that I think is not going to win, but I want to make a statement, a personal statement. But is it because, and finish your thought, in places like Texas and California, it really, the perception may be, it doesn't matter what I do. It's a fait accompli.
It may be a fait accompli for the presidential election, but that's not the only race on the ballot. Right. And this is where it harms our interests. That if we don't have the turnout we need every single election consistently, then we're not electing people all the way down ballot to Congress, to the state legislature, to city councils, to school boards, to water districts, to county officials. Those all positions also are important to our community. But if the mobilization, the money to mobilize people only shows up every 4 years, and then not even in states where most of our voters are, then we're not developing that political power that we need as a community. And that's the challenge that we have before us.
Well, and it's those local officials that you start building the pipeline. One of my favorite stories, I was in Florida having a conversation with a comms director in Miami, and his buddy hit him and said, "Oh, tell her that you ran for office." Like, "Oh, you ran for office?" He's like, "Yeah, I lost by 7 votes." He's like, "You lost by 7 votes?" And the guy's like, "Ask him to whom?" I'm like, "To whom?" "To Marco Rubio." Wow, 7 votes, right? And that was the very first race that Marco Rubio had ever run, and he ran in a special against this man who lost by 7 votes. So when Arturo is saying you have to vote in every election, that's when you start building political voices, a political bench. Increasingly, you don't have enough Latinos running in benches because we're not starting to run for office or we're not participating in Ideal.
So let me ask you, how is it that, do you actually see in your polling, again, I want to go back to something, there is a difference between how you react if you feel slighted, and how you react or don't react if you feel ignored. Because if you feel ignored, sometimes you will ignore those who have ignored you.
Yeah.
So do you get a sense, how do you find that determination? And then I want to ask you about what are some of the most effective programs and policies you've seen that have been able to get into our community and get people motivated. But
well, I think that's right. It's a two-way street. And by not voting in some of these elections in 2014 and others, that's a decision that Latino voters or other voters are making in sending that signal. So there was no competitive election at the top of the ballot in California in 2014, and as it turns out in Texas as well, although there was some hope that there would be. But the voters in that election did not feel that they needed to come out and vote, that it would actually change things. And so if it wasn't at that level for governor or whatever races were exciting in 2014, it needs to be further down. So those candidates who are running for those other offices need to find partners, whether it's community partners or political partners, to go and knock on doors and to communicate and to connect with our community, to connect at college campuses and other places. The kind of excitement that you saw back in 2008 with then Senator Obama running for president and making new connections in new places, we don't always see that. And so when there is less money, when there is less interest in the election, then I would say it's incumbent on the candidates themselves to go door to door. Because when people feel ignored, which I think was the case in California in 2014, I don't think people felt insulted. They didn't feel slighted necessarily, the California Latinos in that year. But the turnout was abysmal, mostly because they felt ignored. We know how to overcome this. There's a lot of good research both in the consulting world and in the academic research world that contacting people, that knocking on their door, that calling them, that texting them, these things work. People who receive those contacts, they feel more engaged, they feel more connected, and they vote at higher rates. And so we need to action those things. We need to put them into place in this election and in midterm elections and in special elections. And until we do that, if our community continues to feel ignored, I think it's very difficult then for a group like Voto Latino to come out and to say, hey, this is a really important election, we need to get your vote. Likely you're encountering some people that say, yes, I agree with you, but I haven't heard one thing from a politician asking for my vote. And so it's very difficult for the civic groups to make that ask if the politicians are ignoring the community,
so,
and that has to change.
Arturo, tell me some of the most effective strategies you've seen to get people, Latinos, to register.
Well, Matt just laid it out, that it is personal contact, is that voters want to feel that they're being individually reached. And this is the other problem with our political system, is that we have a political system that's lazy. They want to get to the 50% plus one. And so they identify who are the likely voters, who's going to vote, how do I get to 50% plus one, and then they leave out the people who are not registered to vote, or they're registered to vote and they don't vote, so they spend all their money just talking to the likely voters.
But that makes sense from their perspective. I mean,
it makes
we're clear on that.
And so we reinforce the cycle that if you don't participate, if you're not registered, no one's going to talk to you. So we need to get out there. I'm not talking to the people in this room, because the candidates' campaigns aren't going to do it, folks. If we want to change the trajectory of our electoral strength in this country, we need to take leadership and ownership of it ourselves.
And I think Matt did a poll in 2014 where when they polled, only 41% of Latinos who had voted in the past were contacted by campaigns or groups. Only 41% of people who had actually participated. That means that they're not only leaving votes on the table, but as Arturo's saying, they don't care. And I say this in a way that we have to figure out what is our political voice, what is going to be our agenda, because otherwise we're going to be on the coattails of whatever that person wants, because it's not necessarily in their interest to all of a sudden have to listen to more people. But that's our job. I mean, that's how democracy functions. It's Cesar Chavez, and I'm going to obliterate it, but he's like, we don't need perfect political systems, but we need perfect participation. Because that's how you start driving an agenda. That's how you start telling people. And that's through one of our efforts that we're doing with CHCI, and we have 400 organizations on board, creating September 15th, the kickoff of Hispanic Heritage Month, as a massive voter registration drive. But we need everybody, right? So you can go to chcivotes.org. And this idea is that you not only can pledge to vote, but you can register to vote. And the organizations I mentioned before are on board. But the idea is, how do we start creating the drumbeat? Because you're right. If we don't have a landslide election this year, from every single corner of every single Latino. Like I keep telling my staff, every single stone has to be unturned. Like I want everybody exhausted, because if we don't exhaust our opportunity and we're not aggressive, this opportunity of our awakening is not going to happen.
That's right.
Because both parties are going to say, oh, it's okay to treat them poorly. They didn't really care.
Let me add one thing here on effective strategies related to turnout and contact. And Arturo said, as I had mentioned, you have to contact people. We know people who are contacted from the research have much, much higher turnout rates. But it doesn't always have to be from the campaigns or from the civic groups. As Maria Teresa just said, you all can get apps, you can contact your friends. And in some research that we did with NALEO back in 2012, we found some of the most important messengers and the most trusted messengers of encouraging other people to vote were your friends and family. And so if
and in particular, your mother or your wife or your girlfriend.
Right.
Yes, people who you listen to. And so if you all, right now, contact people, or if you remember that, it doesn't have to be that the campaign calls someone, that would be wonderful, and asks them to vote, but anyone who reports receiving contact, because it makes you feel wanted, that your vote is important. And so if everyone here contacted 10 people, and told those people to contact 10 people, all of those people who received a contact and said, hey, I really want you to vote. I want you to get out and vote this year. Your vote matters. We know from the research that those people will be much more likely to get out and vote because someone asked them. They asked them to come. They asked them to participate. And so if we can continue that, if we can increase those numbers from 41%, we can all do something about it.
And we've made it super easy for you. We've created toolkits, messaging, everything you possibly can need to literally cut and paste it into your emails, into your phone, everything that you need. We actually have talking points for you.
Give us that address again.
chcivotes.org. And again, you can go there, you can become a partner, but we've literally tried to spoon feed it because we know that this is not what you do every day, this is what we do every day, and we want to make it as easy as possible. And download VoterPal, and then you can start registering everybody too.
And don't underestimate the influence that you have. There are wonderful PSAs that are coming from Telemundo and other affiliates. And there are wonderful outreach campaigns that are happening from Voto Latino and from NALEO. But don't underestimate the influence you have. As we said in the research, when people asked us, who do you really trust? Who do you really want to hear from? Is it the politicians? Is it the civic groups? And who they really wanted to hear from were their loved ones, their friends and family. That those are the people who, if someone contacts you and says, no, I really want you to vote, I need you to come out and vote, and we have a relationship, that's more meaningful.
Sure.
And so if we can do that, if we can use these apps and tools, I think we can do something exciting.
And Maria Teresa, I think it's so important, the timing, right? I mean, you're the 15th, right, of September is the kickoff. One of the things you said that, I immediately thought of my home is when they say, we're going to put $3 million into, Nevada or Florida or wherever. All of a sudden, if you live in those states, you can't answer the phone as we get closer to the election. Because the loved one that you hope will reach out and say to you something of importance can't reach you because your phone is busy with these robocalls of people you don't know or care to hear from that week before the election. And so, there is a difference between not going full steam into something that is overkill and actually doing it consistently.
Right. Well, and this is what Arturo is saying too. We want to make sure that we're there long past the election and identifying what are the issues that people care about, and that's how Voto Latino continues the work, is that we identify what you care about. You care about the environment, we're going to start sharing with you everything that Congress is doing with the environment because we want to be respectful. That said, we've also found that robocalls in the Latino community work very poorly. People are not that interested. They actually, when we call them, they want to know basic information that robocalls do not do. We were the very first organization on a national level to do voter registration via text messaging in 2006. We were way ahead of our time because no one wanted to have a conversation with you via text message to register do a voter registration form. But what we did we were part of a larger study that found that by sending a simple text message to a young white youth, their participation rate increased by 4%. Sending that same text message to a young Latino that we registered increased by 8%. So it was significant because campaigns are not paying attention to that hard-to-reach voter that's seen as highly not swayable, very expensive. And our job at NALEO and Voto Latino is to actually make that investment because we recognize that a voter should not be too expensive to participate in our democracy.
Have you seen candidates or political parties or anything that actually gets this and understands this and doesn't do the 3 weeks before the election move?
Not on the presidential level. I haven't seen it. And this is where I think we need to hold accountable the political parties and the candidates themselves and the campaigns. And we know we have people who are in contact with those campaigns, those candidates, and we need to use our leaders to make sure that these people are receiving those messages from us about what we expect from them.
How did... Yeah, go ahead.
I would actually say it's divided. I think that they haven't put the two elements together. So Bernie Sanders did a fantastic job reaching out to millennials, but not the parents. And Hillary Clinton has done a very good job reaching the parents, but not the millennials. You need both groups. And they don't realize how generationally the Latino community and how diverse the community is, but mostly based on generation. And a candidate that can figure that out is the one that can actually become holistic and recognize the depths and different hues of the community.
I've been fascinated that I do now a daily, like a mini newscast on Facebook Live. Telemundo has, I think, about 5 million people that are part of the Facebook page. And a lot of the comments that I get in the live, broadcast is, oh my gosh, my mom watches you all the time at 6:30, or mi abuelita watches you at 6:30, and now I'm watching you for the first time on Facebook. Yeah. I'm like, I've been talking to your abuelita for years now. Where have you been?
Just yesterday.
Yesterday. And so it is there's a different way of even speaking, right? The way you reach to them.
Yeah. You have to have new strategies today. If you don't have new strategies to reach out to the community, especially to our younger voters, then you are going to be having them ignored, whether it's the candidates or whether it's the civic groups. And whatever strategies we have now, as was evidenced by your story of your news director, it's going to be outdated by the 2020 or 2024 election. And so we not only need to continue to have new strategies, but we need to bring those young people into not only the campaigns and the research community, but in the civic groups, so that they can help us develop those new ideas. And I think that's what Voto Latino is probably especially well known for, is their flexibility in adapting to whatever you guys are doing now will probably change in 2018 and 2020,
Don't stress me out.
Right?
No, but I think that we, unlike other...
So get started on it.
No, we're working on it. So and the difference between the Latino community when we start talking about millennials versus other millennials is that the average Latino voter is a 27-year-old. Generation Z, for the very first time, is going to be able to vote for the first time this year. They're more diverse than the millennials and more Latino, and that generation becomes even bigger. So the majority of Latinos are actually clustered around roughly 14 years old. So we haven't seen the wave of the Latino voter that, for the most part, is a young voter. So when people start talking about this issue of a living wage, this idea that they want to be able to have, they want to be able to figure out when they want to start a family, the environment, the ability to figure out when or not they have student loans, we're actually talking about a very different type of American voter that's living it in the Latino millennial today. They're not nostalgic voters. They're not the average white voter who's 43 years old that may have already lived that and said, oh, that was tough, so I want to create a different pathway for my kids. No, the Latino voter is actually living it right now. And if we're not present at the table, you're going to have politicians that are actually making decisions for you that do not have the ability to actually connect with what you're doing. And what I mean by that is that the average senator is a 72-year-old white male. His children, when he goes home for Christmas, his grandchildren are in college. His grandchildren are not even living the experience of a typical Latino today who is in the classroom. So there's a big disconnect, and that's why we need you all to run for office.
We're going to open up if you guys want to have comments or questions. I'd love to hear from you, and we could have this two-way conversation. You know what? And this is just between us, and let's go to the questions, but this is just between all of us.
And Facebook and...
Yeah. I can't figure out, and still, I can't figure it out. When you look at the numbers, Latino community, 57 million strong. The number that we hear often is, 53,000 U.S.-born Latinos turn 18 years of age every single month in this country. I think they've broken it down to every 30 seconds or something. And yet, sometimes I think we're living in two worlds, and that corporations, campaigns, politicians, networks don't really, they intellectually understand the numbers, but it doesn't really seep into their reality how powerful, how big the purchasing power, the potential voting power of the Latino community is. And how is it that that exists?
I mean,
Go ahead.
one, I think, is that their children are not in our classrooms. I think it speaks to a highly segregated system that no one talks about. One. Two, I do think that they actually see our potential, and that's why you're seeing Voting Rights Act. So Shelby County versus Eric Holder in 2013 gutted the Voting Rights Act. And Shelby County, the unspoken truth is that it was the 5th largest county of Latino population boom by over 200%. If you look at all the other states that followed, they had a population boom of 100%. So there's certain people that see our political potential that are trying to ensure that we are not fully being able to participate by casting a ballot. That we have to make sure we are woke, as my younger people like to say, and that we're paying attention and that we recognize that we're on to them. And that's why we have to make sure that we're participating. But I also think that we have to, I mean, I do think that it's based that. It's like you have a lot of executives who just, they may see someone that is cleaning their home but not realize that that person has 3 American children at home. Because their kids don't go to school.
In answer to your question, Jose, I actually think that certain segments of corporate America does understand that.
Yes.
Because corporate America knows
certain segments,
certain sectors, that if they are going to sell their product, if they're going to be successful in their business, they need to understand that their clientele has changed. And there are certain companies that actually have done very well in identifying Latinos as their consumers. And those are the companies that I think, if you look around and who's supporting this event, are the ones who get it. And the others are going to be left behind.
There's some questions. I don't know how the setup is with microphones. There are a few people with microphones, I believe.
Hi. First of all, thank you so much for being here today and engaging us in such an important topic like civic engagement. You spoke a lot about millennials, and that's definitely a group that I belong to. And my question is really kind of goes to the theme that you've all touched on, various points. You mentioned that democracy is messy, it requires participation, and I'm thinking about Mr. Vargas's point and how the electoral process focuses on this 4-year cycle process where we care about primary elections, presidential elections. And I'm wondering, you've all touched on the importance of reaching out to the millennial vote, the age-in population at this moment now. I'm wondering, looking past 2016, what can be done to change that culture of participation that often is lacking in the Latino household entirely, where our children need to be taught to engage in different methods early on? What can be done, if anything, and are there any efforts at play?
Great question.
Now?
Yeah, I would love for the funding community, and I'm talking about foundations and these donors who invest in getting their political outcomes, would spend their money as if they're preparing us as a community, Latinos, to vote in 2032. The long term. And that's what we need. We need an investment in the long game. The fact is, by 2032, there will be 17 million more Latinos eligible to vote. And we know exactly who they are and where they are. They're in our classrooms today. They're in daycare today. 17 million of them will be eligible to vote in 2032. So what are we going to do between now and then to create this culture of participation so that when they turn 18, registering to vote and voting is just something we all do? And that's the different strategies I believe we need to take into creating that culture.
And one way to address it is that what folks don't realize is that only 8 states require civic education in their schools. 8 states. So if you only have 8 states that require civic education in order to graduate.
What does that include? What do those 8 states include in civic education?
What
does that mean these days?
Well, basically that you actually know about the Electoral College, that you know about voting, like how to register. So some of our work is just teaching people the basics and then getting them interested. But imagine if all of a sudden we had a commitment at the school level, and everybody here, you can start signing, go to change.org and start telling your states that you want this implemented. But But if you have 8 states that only require civic education to graduate from high school, but the majority of kindergartners today, 51% of them are people of color, the majority of them being Latino, whose parents perhaps have not gone through the whole school system themselves, you can imagine why there is a whole lack of understanding and why participating in your electoral process might seem a little daunting, because no one's mentioned it to you, then all of a sudden when you're 18, if you're lucky, right? If you're lucky that you stumble upon a Voto Latino or a NALEO or another organization, because again, we haven't built the infrastructure as a community.
2 things to this idea that you can take back home and hopefully write some letters about. One is that in some states, you can pre-register to vote when you get your driver's license when you're 16 or 17. And so you're not eligible to actually go out and cast a ballot, but you can get on the rolls. And so if we did that in partnership with schools and other places, if we pre-registered people and said, you're going to be a voter, rather than waiting for someone to come back and renew their license when they're 22 or 23 and now they live in a different city or state. So that's one. And the places where they have that pre-registration, you do see higher participation. And the second is what you're starting to see in some states, which is the automatic voter registration. So if we can make that process easier, if we can get everybody on the voter rolls when they do have an interaction with their DMV or other types of office where you're providing credentials and information, then we can start to get more people on the voter rolls. Because a big part of our turnout issue is that we're not registered at the right rates. So if we can get more people on the voter rolls, when the campaigns do outreach, yes, they're not going to contact everybody, but they start with the voter roll. That's where they start. That's where a lot of organizations start. So we need to do a better job of getting people on. And that's happening in some states. So if we can spread that message, we might be able to do it in more.
And I'm so sorry, but I know that it sounds kind of crazy that we should do automatic voter registration, but the idea that organizations such as us exist to register to vote is ludicrous. The federal government is now outsourcing who basically ensures for you to do your IRS, right? Like, that's on you. You have to make sure that you're doing your IRS, you get penalized, X, Y, Z. That should kind of be the same thing that if you're not registered to vote, it's part of your civic duty.
It would seem that everybody would be, maybe I'm naive, but all sides would agree that educating kids on the importance of respecting and participating in democracy would be a pretty non-controversial issue, right?
You would think.
Not telling you how to vote, but to get you interested and involved in the process of democracy, right? But I'm wrong, maybe. Anybody else? Any question? Yes.
Oh. Hi. So thank you so much for your conversation today. I'm a little starstruck. I want to take a selfie with you, Maria. So my name is Braulio Carrasco, and I feel like I get talked about a lot because I'm one of those pesky millennials, right? And what I want us to push us, and my question here is this. I'm from Minnesota. I was born in the Dominican Republic, so you're right. We are everywhere in this country, and I feel sometimes we limit ourselves, we pigeonhole ourselves by talking about Latino issues. You brought up the example of North Carolina, and you know, gay rights are also Latino rights. Yeah. Latino rights and environment rights are also American rights. And I feel like I want to push us into having a conversation. I read an article about how millennials, especially Latinos, are ambicultural. It used to be that you wanted to be in the melting pot, but nowadays, as a Dominican American, I like bachata just as much as I like David Guetta, just as much as I like, I don't know, Sia. So I would like us to have these conversations so that it's not like, oh, immigration is just for Latinos and they're not going to pay attention to the environment. They're not really about, you know, the right to choose and all these other issues. Instead of waiting for us to get invited, we need to insert ourselves in those conversations, which means we do have to take a political stand. And I want us also to talk a little more about participation outside of voting. Because in Minnesota, a lot of folks, like myself, before I became a citizen, I was doing door knockings, phone calling, all these things way before I was able to vote. So sometimes the focus on voting actually shuts out a lot of other people in our community. And I want us to, you know, elevate the conversation because, you know, there's school boards. You can go talk to your mayor. You can go to city council and do a ton of things. I'm also a classroom teacher. So when it comes to talking about educating our kids, yeah, I'm preparing our voters for what, 2028 or whenever it is. So I want us to have more of a visionary conversation because this country in 20, 30 years, it's not about being a melting pot. It's about more of a citizen of the world. And that's the way I see myself. and I'm preparing my kids.
That's a great, I like all of you. By the way, the only point of disagreement with you personally is that any Victor song is better than David Guetta any day of the week. Just for you and your bachata issue, okay? Do not compare. But that's a separate issue.
You know, the point you made about there are other forms of participation besides actually voting, and there's one area where we truly are lagging behind as a community, and that's in financial investment in the process and in our institutions. Mm-hmm. We are not giving enough to our organizations, and I'll call it out, it's a little bit of a self-interest, but to get a Latino to actually be a donor to a Latino cause is like pulling teeth. Mm-hmm. And to get Latinos to actually give to a Latino candidate, ask the candidate how difficult it is to raise money, to run for office and to be competitive.
Yep.
And that's the other element of political participation that we need to evolve into. Because if we look at what other communities do to gather the resources to run their candidates, whether it's in the gay community or the Jewish community, the African American community, money in the system, for all its flaws, is one of the elements that actually translates into political power, and that's where we need to actually be.
And I think, and what Arturo is saying is right, we have to have a coming to Jesus moment as a community of what are our priorities. Because if we start depending on other organizations to have a project manager and do a shop where the head of that organization is not waking up and saying, how do I improve the Latino community every single day, which is what we're seeing, we're not going to have that political voice and that flexibility and that muscle that we need. You're absolutely right. And when I was saying that, the whole thing about North Carolina, I was more making an attribution, not that Latinos don't care about gay issues, but the opposite, that you had a group of highly organized folks within the gay community that made corporate America pay attention and care. But at Voto Latino, we have a campaign that, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
No, go.
Yeah. No, that was.
No, please.
I'm done.
Well, you know, I want to ask you a question that he brought up. Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'll kind of bounce off your brilliant question, I thought. It's not only the Hispanic community and how we see ourselves and how we educate our children, but it's also how the wider country sees us and how they, to use Arturo's term, just don't see us as a group that they need to get votes from. And how do we educate them that it's not taco bowls or hot sauce in the purse? How do we educate others to say, this is a community that cares about all of the issues that you care for and are participating as much as you and the people you know?
Well, I thought that was an important part of the question, that we do have a variety of interests and issues. And one of the things that I would encourage all of us here to do is to seek out those other organizations. If your issue is gay rights or environmental protection or women's right to choose or more investment in K-12 education, if that's the issue you're passionate about, we need to have more Latino staffers and directors and volunteers at all of these organizations, so that those organizations don't just pigeonhole us into the immigration issue. Yes, we know that we care about immigration reform and that we have many friends and family members who would benefit from this, and we do want to see some action on that. But we also care about these other issues. Every time we do a survey, a poll on another issue besides immigration, it always raises so many eyebrows and, wow, Latinos really care about climate change. Yes, we do. And so if we can get young people working at these organizations, oftentimes there's just one person in these other organizations, these non-immigration issue organizations. If we can get 2, if we can get 3, if we can get more, then they'll start to see us across a variety of issues, and we can start talking about all of the issues that we care about, not necessarily at the expense of immigration, but in addition.
Yes?
Maria Vasquez from ACT, and I am from Texas. I wanted to find out if you've ever encountered this. I went to go vote, I guess it was during the last presidential election in Texas. And when I got to the polls, I was told, I'm sorry, you can't vote. And I was kind of shocked, saying, why? And they said, well, you're going to have to stand aside and let me make a few calls. So I stood aside, and then they came back and they said, ma'am, you're going to have to talk to the secretary in Texas. Why? They said, well, because you're a convicted felon. I have never even gotten a speeding ticket. So I had to go through this process to try to get my name looked at and then say it wasn't this person, because apparently there was another Maria Vasquez, when you have a very common name, that may have been convicted, but in Texas they purged all the Maria Vasquezes from the voters that year. And it took me several years to get back on.
Were you able to vote that day, Maria?
No, it took me 2 years. 2 years. And I'm an educated woman, and my husband is a retired judge. So if it took me 2 years and I was educated, how about those people that don't know the process? Because do you have a toolkit or something in your toolkit to say, well, if you can't vote, this is what you need to do, step 1, step 2, step 3? It happened, and it was in Texas. Wondering how many other states this happens.
Yeah. That's a great question.
The Voting Rights Act.
Yeah, make no mistake about it. I think our voting rights in this country are under assault. And they're under assault first by people who want to suppress the Latino vote, which is why we've seen the emergence of voter ID laws, proof of citizenship laws to register to vote, and other such things. Thank goodness for the appellate courts that invalidated the North Carolina and Texas voter ID laws for this election cycle. But the fact that we lost the Voting Rights Act strength to protect the right to vote in so many of these states that previously required federal permission to make some of these changes no longer exists. The other place where our voting rights are under assault is simply by malfeasance and the misadministration of elections, of people who don't know how to run elections. And we've seen this time and time again. We saw this in Arizona in the primary this year, where they decided to close all these polling locations to save money, and people had to wait 10 hours in the sun, in the Arizona sun, to vote.
Maria, the question that Maria says here is there a way that we know of that if you are interested in voting and are finding that you're being blocked, you can
so
find...
I would say, I was expecting Arturo to plug his hotline. Plug your hotline.
Call our hotline.
No, let's do it.
Yeah.
1-888-VEY-VOTA.
VEY-VOTA.
Yeah, VEY-VOTA. It's a hotline that is run all year long, staffed by bilingual operators who are able to answer any questions about how to become a citizen, how to register to vote, what are the requirements for voting in your particular state. We're able to also provide you information if you're registered to vote, and then also what are your rights as a voter.
So Arturo, in her case, for example, that she was told, sorry, you're a convicted felon, and like, I'm not, but how do you prove it? Is there a way, I mean, could that number have helped at least orient?
Every voter should be entitled to a provisional ballot. A provisional ballot that you can cast on election day, and then once your eligibility is verified, is counted.
Yeah, but if it's 2 years later.
So, well, and that's the challenge, and it's not by accident. But then we also partner with the Lawyers Committee, and it's 1-888-OUR-VOTE. And if you are at your polling location on election day.
Teresa, sorry, what's that again?
1-888-OUR-VOTE.
Our vote.
Our vote. OUR vote. And so what they do though is they're lawyers. They patch you in. They work very closely with NALEO's organization, and they start recording incidences. So they basically track those incidences, and then they will start basically creating record and go to the state Secretary of States as well.
So we're out of time, but I'm going to ask for one more question. But just so the numbers again, because we all speak very fast, you know that. Yours is me
888. VEY-VOTA, VEY-VOTA.
And then the English language version of that?
I believe it's 888-OUR-VOTE.
Our vote. Okay, one last question because we've unfortunately run out of time. Yes, sir.
Luis Caldera with a new institute, a senior fellow at the Cisneros Hispanic Leadership Institute at George Washington University, where we're looking forward to welcome Maria Teresa tomorrow night to kick off Hispanic.
Yay, Maria Teresa! Fabulous. What time is it?
But a quick question. I think what you've been saying is absolutely right in terms of the lack of the bench, how much it hurts us not to have voter participation as a base of voters. But if you look beyond the presidential, where are the opportunities, the best opportunities to pick up Senate seat or congressional seats, new seats? Because another thing we don't hear about is the Latino candidates who are trying to make history by being elected in places where we've never had someone elected before, and that gives us an opportunity to do also what Arturo said, which is to send some of our dollars and some of our support for those candidates.
So you're saying pickup meaning Latino pickup?
Yeah, Latino seats. What are the best opportunities this cycle, Senate or House?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Secretary. For those who don't know, former Secretary of the Army, Luis Caldera there. So in California, Salud Carvajal, who is a county supervisor for Santa Barbara County, is running in the district to replace Lois Capps, who retired. That would be a Latino pickup. That would be a non-Latino incumbent being replaced by a Latino. The other one, of course, is Adriano Espiat's district, where Charlie Rango has retired. He's won the primary. It's a very Democratic seat, so he has a good chance there. Salud Carvajal's district he's running in, the 24th, though is not as strong a Democratic seat as the New York seat. So turnout is going to be very, very important.
What about California Senate?
California Senate, Loretta Sanchez, she is trying to use the top two primary system to her advantage by trying to put together the coalition of moderates and Republicans to take on Kamala Harris, who's running with very strong support from the left and the Democratic Party, which is another problem, that the party already got behind a candidate without having the contest play out itself. And of course in Nevada. Where we have the former Attorney General Cortez Masto running for the United States Senate. That would be a pickup, and that could, again, will depend on turnout, and may even have the first Latina in the United States Senate.
Very quick for one more question. Anybody want to wrap it up, the last question? Yes.
Sure. Hi, Ana Lopez Van Balen. I'm from here, Washington, D.C. My quick question is, it's one thing to vote, it's another to know who to vote for and what the issues are. And I find that there's nothing out there in any jurisdiction to really understand how do you even start to figure out who you're going to vote for, besides the presidential, especially when there's tons of meat at the presidential level. After that, there's nothing.
I don't think that's wrong, but I think if you want to know about ballot initiatives in your local level, there's a great organization called ballot.org. It's called biscballot.org, and they basically go to the local level and basically provide different ballot initiatives. I think on the different candidates, it's up to the party, right? It's up to each party to make sure that they're providing you with the information. League of Women Voters has a really comprehensive voter guide for the most part, but you can imagine that when you get more local, it really depends on that Secretary of State to provide you with information.
Right. I would just add one thing. If you call the candidates, find some of the candidates, if you call their office or their campaign and tell them you haven't heard from them, when they start hearing from more Latinos calling them and saying, hey, how come I haven't heard from you? That's all you need to say. Then they're going to start contacting you.
Oh, and I think online they should have, every candidate should have proposals and policy statements about what they're hoping to achieve if they do get the privilege of your vote. And if they're not, then you shouldn't support them.
That's right.
If they don't have that kind of respect towards, the honesty of why they should be in office, they shouldn't be in office, right? Mm-hmm. Hey guys, I think we've run out of time. I want to thank Maria Teresa, Matt, and Arturo for being here, but especially all of you for your participation and for your time. I'd also like to thank you for joining us here, and those online, thank you. Thanks to Dell and SCIU for making the session possible. And I hope you enjoyed this morning's meeting. We did. We speak very quickly, huh? Very, very quickly.